perhaps 100 times. He realized that his actions were punishable by death. And he used to ask me, will I be executed? I never said he wouldn't. I never said he wouldn't be executed. I used to say one thing. Only if you confess everything and repent fully can you hope for mercy. That's probably why Penkovsky's life was not spared. He didn't confess everything. I know for sure that Penkovsky was shot. I can't tell you anything else. I know his body was cremated. I don't know any more, and I'm not interested.
Not all spies wound up famous. These are the home movies of Galina and Mikhail Fyodorov, KGB officers who operated under deep cover for 20 years. They were never caught. In the event of war, they would be in place to spy behind enemy lines. The KGB never lacked recruits. Some served for money, some for ideology, and some for the sheer excitement of living a secret life.
I love espionage. Why? Because there is the smell of adventure, the smell of risk, the smell of uncertainty. Because when you go off to meet an agent, you never know whether you're going to be arrested. It adds color to life.
I need 007.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Spy mania in London started about the time I arrived. In 1961, we used to be asked everywhere. We were very popular. We would be invited to private parties, and the attitude towards us was good. But as the 60s went on, there were those big disasters with Blake and the other KGB spies. And you had the Profumo scandal with the prostitute, Christine Keeler. That shook Britain up a bit. After that, when I turned up somewhere, people would ask, "Are you a spy?" So I'd say, "Of course I'm a spy."
Western governments grew weary of the huge KGB presence in their midst. In 1971, the British expelled 105 Soviet intelligence officers, identified by a defector. Technology increasingly assumed the burden of spying. Satellites could now intercept radio communications and data from test launches of the opposition's missiles. Film taken in space no longer even had to be returned to Earth.
The satellite would take the picture of the sky, and this image could be beamed back to an analyst at his desk in the United States who could actually see what was happening in the international arena without leaving his desk.
Here lay the greatest intelligence successes of the Cold War. Through photography and electronic eavesdropping, each side received huge flows of information, often too much for the analysts to handle. Technological spying even played a part in helping the superpowers edge towards peace.
The technical systems were almost essential to our arms control process. We learned just all kinds of things about Russian military systems from the photographs and from the electronic listening. At one point when we were negotiating the SALT II arms control treaty, I had to go to the Senate and say, if you ratify this treaty, this is how closely I can monitor it and check on whether they are complying with the terms of the treaty.
Despite a fleet of spy ships, listening posts worldwide, and Sputniks overhead, Soviet technical intelligence lagged behind the West. Even so, they claimed to have cracked the ciphers of over 60 countries, obtaining many codes by theft and blackmail.
Soviet technical intelligence was far inferior to Soviet human intelligence. The Soviets were extremely good at persuasive tactics, which would ultimately bring many people into their ideological embrace.
KGB spying methods spread beyond superpower conflict. Routine surveillance of ordinary citizens by the East German secret police, or Stasi. The Stasi inhabited a moral world of its own. Interrogations were routinely filmed. And they had cameras everywhere.
Relations between the various areas of counterintelligence and with the department which handled interrogations were very amicable. There were all sorts of people there, and it was a friendly atmosphere. They weren't the kind of devious types who'd use atrocious methods to force confessions out of people.
Nichts, was habe ich denn bewerkstelligt? Ich habe nichts unternommen.
Das ist doch gar nicht wahr.
Was habe ich denn unternommen?
Fragen Sie mich doch nicht, erzählen Sie
Ich
mir.
habe nichts unternommen.
Natürlich.
Ich habe nichts, gar nichts.
Also es gab schon sehr Schlimmes. Es gab
Well,
viele Fälle
terrible things did happen.
Unrecht.
There were many cases of injustice, particularly in the later years, which really bothered me. Reprisals were taken against people solely on the grounds that they had different political opinions,
Politische Meinung hatten.
or against people who wanted a different, better form of socialism.
Vera Wollenberger joined the East German peace movement in 1981, encouraged by her husband Knut.
Mein ganz persönlicher Anlass, mich gegen
My personal motivation for opposing state policies was the decision in the early 80s to station nuclear missiles in the GDR
zu stationieren und
and to introduce military instruction in schools.
Schulen einzuführen.
Vera and her family were constantly harassed by the Stasi, who burgled her house and made sure she lost her teaching job. Her husband stood by her throughout. In 1988, Vera was arrested on her way to this demonstration. Her crime? Carrying a banner which bore Rosa Luxemburg's words, "Freedom is how free your opponent is." She was interrogated and imprisoned. In 1991, after the collapse of the GDR, Vera got access to her Stasi file, in which she learned that the main informer against her had been her own husband.
Das kann ich gar nicht so genau sagen, weil
I can't really say how I felt. It was such an extreme situation, rather as if one had died for a moment and then returned to life.
dann ins Leben zurückkehren. Das Überraschende war für mich, dass
The surprising thing was, the reports were written as if about a stranger, not about a wife.
Ich war eine Ehefrau. Ich war eine Feindin.
To him, I was an enemy of the state, and he had done everything to fight me, the enemy.
zu bekämpfen.
Some enemies of the state received more drastic treatment. In 1978, Bulgarian intelligence asked the KGB to help them kill the émigré writer and broadcaster Georgy Markov. Markov was murdered at a London bus stop by a stranger who accidentally prodded him with the tip of an umbrella.
The Bulgarians were given a choice of weapons, and finally they picked up this umbrella as a cover to shoot the man with a poisoned pellet. It was not supposed to be uncovered because the pellet would dissolve in his body within 24 hours, if I recall correctly. I did not conceive, I did not plan, I was not involved in any execution, but I was aware. And I always say that knowledge does not